Let's pray. God, I just ask as you come and visit us, as you're present in our midst, as your truth is present in your word in this world, and as we try to figure out whose we are and who you are, I just ask that you would accept my resignation, set me behind the cross. Let me surrender fully that you might speak through me to all of us gathered here. And for that, I thank you in advance. Amen. I was explaining to Jim about this new series, and I've had a hard time getting all the pieces together, and actually, that's not true. I had a hard time limiting the number of pieces that I had for this series, and I said to Jim at the end of it, what I'm really asking all of us to do, and you have to understand, as soon as I heard these words come out of my mouth, I thought to myself, and you are the worst one at this, I said, I'm going to ask all of us to slow down. I don't know if you guys knew this, but this is me slowed down. So when I say I'm asking us to slow down, I really sincerely mean, as we start now and look to the end of this year, we'll go through Advent, we'll celebrate Christmas, look at the beginning of next year, try to learn to slow down. There are 3-letter words that matter a whole lot in this whole series. The first one's up there, earlier is up there, awe. Awed is past tense, awe. Remember that word, awe. The other one I'll tell you in just a little bit, you'll hear more about it. But I want to ask you to look at this. Look at this information that God gives us in his words without trying to explain. There's a podcast that I listen to that has a promo in it, and one of the promos is for a news program, and the intro is a well-known anchorman saying, the last several years have been difficult and hard on many of us. We're looking for answers. We're trying to find out what it all means for us, our families, and the people we care about. What it all means. Isn't that what we're looking for is meaning? We're looking for meaning. Because meaning is what separates us, what sets us apart from stuff that doesn't have volition, that there is no will. A tree doesn't get to choose anything. It's a tree. It's either up or it's down. It's dry or it's alive. But there's no choice. There's no motivation in that. But you and I, we have agency. We can make decisions. And those decisions are always guided by a search for meaning. And I know that if you know much about Scripture, and if you know about the book of Ecclesiastes, you would be saying right now, how on earth is he using the word meaning connected to that book? Because the word meaningless occurs in Ecclesiastes more often than any other word in that book. It actually starts, and if you don't know where Ecclesiastes is, right, almost exactly in the middle of your Bible, it's right before Isaiah. But if you have a NIV Bible or many other, the subtitle for the first chapter, and the first verse of Ecclesiastes is, everything is meaningless. Verse 2, Ecclesiastes 1:2. Meaningless, says the teacher, utterly meaningless. Everything is meaningless. What does man gain from all his labor at which he toils under the sun? Generations come and generations go, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises and the sun sets and hurries back to where it rises. The wind blows to the south and to the north. Round and round it goes, but it ever returns to its course. And it goes on. Everything is meaningless. And that's not the whole story. What Ecclesiastes is trying to get us to is that the things that we do in life, the accomplishments that we have, the reputations we amass, the funds we amass, the wealth, the impact that we make on others, human endeavors, ultimately go away. It doesn't matter how much money you earn, how many people you influence. It doesn't matter how much time you spend doing good things. At some point, you're not going to be alive on this earth any longer. And all of those things, at the very best, will pass on to someone else. So we don't get to keep any of the stuff that happens. We don't get to keep any of the things that we do. And even the things that we do for others that are good, the reality is somebody else will come along and do those things. And in that experience where everything seems to change, when we're grasping for a place to anchor ourselves, how do we find meaning and purpose? The answer to the question is critical, because the search for meaning doesn't go away. And when we can't find an understanding, when we can't grasp meaning from what we do, we begin to shrink. And we draw our world in, and we make it smaller and smaller. And then we begin to protect ourselves. And as we begin to protect ourselves, we build walls. Because things that we don't understand are things that frighten us fundamentally. We are not comfortable with the unknown. We are not comfortable with what changes all the time. As I was praying about how we should end this year, I just kept coming back to this notion of mystery. Mystery is one of those things that it doesn't mean scary. When you have a mystery story, sometimes it's a frightening thing. I don't want to think about that side of mystery. Mystery is something we don't fully understand, but fundamentally, it's something we can't understand. And we have to find a way to accept that. So I gave you the beginning part of Ecclesiastes chapter 1. Now, the section for today is in Ecclesiastes chapter 3, and it's verses 9 to 14. Verse 11, though, is the one that's on the screen, and that's the main thing that we're going to look at. But I want to give you the context around it first. Ecclesiastes 3:9, and you all have probably heard, if you've been to a funeral that I've done, it's most likely you've heard part of this passage before, because verses 1 through 8 are the passage that state there's a time for everything, a time to live and a time to die and all that. This comes right after that. What do workers gain from their toil? I have seen the burden God has laid on the human race. And then verse 11, He has made everything beautiful in its time. He has also set eternity in the human heart. Yet no one can fathom what God has done from beginning to end. I know that there is nothing better for people than to be happy and to do good while they live, that each of them may eat and drink and find satisfaction in all their toil. This is the gift of God. I know that everything God does will endure forever. Nothing can be added to it, and nothing taken from it. He has made everything beautiful in its time. It's interesting. I don't know if you may know the name Richard Feynman. He's a noted, he's a physicist. He has a Nobel Prize in physics for quantum mechanics. And he's also an atheist. But what Richard Feynman says is that it's easy to find truth if you follow the beauty. Think about that for a minute. This is one of those slow down things. The search for truth, and other scientists say the same thing, the search for truth begins with looking for beauty. If you follow the beauty, you'll discover two things. You'll discover that the beauty exists on its own, and you'll discover that it is real. And when you discover what is beautiful and true, you tap into what is utterly simple. God is. Sometimes we try to add to that and give all these adjectives. The mystery that I want us to be willing to accept and to try to live into is that we end the statement, God is, with is. That's what God said to Moses when he was sending him back to get the Israelites out of Egypt. Moses asked, well, what do I tell them when they ask me, who sent me? What's your name, God? And God says, I am. And the reason God says, I am, folks, very simple. Because beyond that, we can't grasp the fullness of who God is. And all of our attempts to explain are fine in the sense that they help us put a human term to a God that we can't fully understand. But we do need to be able to surrender and not demand an answer to questions that we can't get an answer to. Not ask God to make something clear that we'll never understand, because I've said this before, but everything that I can fit inside my mind none of that is big enough to save me or to help any of you. If it fits in here, then it's way smaller than I am. And I know this, no matter what I think I can accomplish, I need God every single day. I need a God, not a God. I need a God bigger than I am, wiser than I am, a God that's willing to take my hand and say, listen, Russ, I get that you don't get it. Can you understand that I can't explain it to you? Just trust me. Just trust me. It's hard to trust in the mystery because we want answers. We want to find meaning, and it seems backward, but you find the most meaning by accepting that you'll never fully explain it. And if you've held a baby right after it's been born, you've come close to the experience of awe. So how does this happen? How does it happen? Just take a minute. These two cells come together. And from that point, those two cells come together. And this is the result. And it's different every single time. How does it happen? It's not an accident, folks. Any good scientist will tell you that although they may not agree about the author or the designer, that it's impossible to imagine a universe as complex and vast as ours is, as having its origin just an accident. This is an amazing watch. And I've had many watches over my lifetime, but I can tell you this. If you asked me to take this watch apart, take all the components apart from it, and stick it in my rock tumbler that I had back when I was like 9 years old, and have it start spinning around, and then hope at some point in time, hope that I will open that rock tumbler and discover that all those pieces have come together into this watch. Come on. That isn't going to happen, and this is just a simple watch. Part of awe is accepting that when we try to explain everything, Genesis doesn't tell us how God made everything. It simply tells us that he did. And that's something that science has observed, and it's absolutely true. We know that there is a time when the universe wasn't, and there's a time when the universe came into being, and we can argue all we want to about what that means. But as Jim Martinelli pointed out to me a couple of weeks ago, one of the most stunning things is when you look at the stars in the sky and realize that light source no longer exists. It's so far away, and light is traveling across this vast space that is reaching us without anything behind it. Folks, I can't even grasp that. To be awed by mystery is to tap into two words that I want us to think about. The first is beauty. And that's what verse 11 starts out with. He has made everything beautiful in its time. When was the last time you prayed for God to show you what was beautiful in something? I'll be honest with you, until I started writing this series, I wasn't doing it on a regular basis. But that's one of our challenges. One of the things that I want you to do between now and the end of the year, I want you to get comfortable asking God very simply to show you what is beautiful in those things that don't make sense and those things that are painful and hurting. Because you can see the beauty in families that care about each other even in the midst of loss. It isn't a wonderful thing to grieve, but the fact that people can understand your grief, the fact that people can own your grief, it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. Ask God to show you. See, when we ask God to guide us towards something like beauty, it takes surrender, because some of it we see and some of it we think we know what we're looking at. But I'm talking about a deeper, deeper beauty. God promised this. Everything God has made is beautiful in its time. Things change, life changes, but beauty is part of what God has given us. That's why the scientists understand that beauty points to truth, because God's in charge of both of those things. Beauty and truth. It's not an accident. It's a plan. It's a purpose. We find meaning when we search for what is beautiful. I watched those guys play football all season, and every time I went in to talk with them before the game, I said this and I meant it. I'd say, I don't know anything about football, guys. I really don't. But what I got to do it was beautiful to me to watch them play. Because I know that doesn't matter how well you throw that football at me, the best case scenario is I don't get hurt. That is my optimal outcome when a sphere that's shaped like that is heading my direction. If I don't get hurt, that's the best outcome. Now, if I don't get hurt and I don't look like an idiot, that's like, I'm done. I'm going to walk away and never get near a football again. Watching what they do, the gifts that God has given them, and just using the skills that they have is a beautiful thing. We can find beauty if we look for it. We find beauty if we look for it. Ask God to show you beauty. Ask God to direct you to those things which can't be fully explained. Because beauty can't be separated from truth. Hear this. Beauty can't be separated from truth. We are all searchers. That's what God planted in us. And it says that right in Ecclesiastes 3:11. He has also set eternity in the human heart. Yet no one can fathom what God has done from beginning to end. God has set eternity in our hearts. We are searching for it. We are looking for something bigger than we are. But the truth is, we can't grasp all that God is. It doesn't say we can't grasp anything. It says we can't grasp everything. Herein lies the value of mystery. To be able to say, God, I know you're behind this. Let me soak it in. Let me soak it in. Lynn mentioned some friends of ours, a Methodist pastor and his wife from Cuba, were in this country. Now, Jose speaks English well, and he can preach in English, but Mercedes, his wife, only has a little bit of English, not much at all. When she came here, I don't think she'd had any English lessons or anything, and so we had interpreters, and people were trying to help Mercedes understand what was going on, and Jose's a great interpreter. Lynn and I had the privilege to take them to Washington, D.C. I was born in Washington, D.C. The statue they had there for me is gone. But not forgotten. and I've been there a bunch. My sister lives outside of D.C., so I enjoy it. So we took them to Washington, D.C. And you know, all of the things, if you've been there, think of all the things that are there, and you're going to show them. I mean, this is the grand display of freedom, right? I mean, that is something to be proud of. The fact that we are in a democracy where I can take people who live in a communist country and show them what we do. I didn't have to apologize for it. I didn't have to hide it. I didn't have to explain it. I didn't worry about getting in any trouble whatsoever. I mean, it is fantastic that people can participate in our government. And this is what's going through my head. You know what they wanted to see? You know what Jose took thousands of pictures of? Squirrels. Apparently they don't have any of them in Cuba. The squirrel that I'm looking at Jose's pictures and I'm like, dude, all you're getting is the squirrel. And at first I'm looking for what else is in there. Because he goes down with his camera like this. And I'm like, what's he taking a picture of? And finally it dawned on me, he's taking pictures of squirrels. And Mercedes could only say one word, and it's the one I want you to say for the rest of this year. She'd look at something and we'd try to describe, point out, and she'd go, wow. And that was, and she noticed how people responded, obviously. She'd just look at something and go, wow. Say it with me. Wow. Jim, can I have that slide? I want you to look at this for a minute. I took this picture in Portland, Oregon. There's an international rose test garden, where they allow anyone who's breeding roses and wants to see how well they'll do. Apparently in Portland, Oregon, it's an ideal climate for roses. And it was a wow time. I just kept looking at these flowers. I can't explain them, but I am drawn to them. I was sitting with my mom, showing her pictures, and one of the things that I can do on Sunday nights with her is show her videos and things, endless videos of the dog and all kinds of other stuff, which she enjoys looking at, and she asks all kinds of questions about. So I was going through my phone, and I was flipping past. I showed her the pictures of Portland that had Corey and Maya in them and what we did in our house and everything, and I'm trying to go past these, and my mom stopped me. She said, go back. Where did you find that? And we just sat and looked at it. You know, my mom is 90. A lot of what comes out of her mouth right now doesn't make a lot of sense. She'll tell me that she made a wonderful dinner for us when I know I brought it in. She'll say, I'm glad I knew that you were coming so I could get everything ready. She wondered why I had a company car, something I've never had in my lifetime. All kinds of things. But when we stopped and looked at that picture, we were in the same place. We were connected in a way that only wow can do. Folks, there is wow around you. There is wow everywhere. We get so caught up in finding answers, making explanations, taking positions, shaping our world, changing our investments, looking for jobs, looking to get out of jobs, looking at retirement, looking to get employed, looking at what we're doing. You know what? All that stuff can happen, but it won't change your life. I'm absolutely certain, because I've experienced it for myself. There's only one reason that Lynn and I do the traveling that we do. The reason is very simply awe. When we went in the Nobel Prize Museum in Stockholm and listening to all these guys talking about how they came up with some of these decisions, these realizations, the helical structure of DNA. I think it was, can't think of the guy's name right now, that's okay. I don't want to take credit for it, but he was describing he was bored and he was folding paper. And as he was in his boredom folding paper because he couldn't do something else because he was sick and he was restricted to how much activity he had, laying on a table, not able to do much, and he was bored, so he's folding paper, and therein he discovered the helical nature of DNA. How does that happen? Because God has created us to look out, to look around and to learn and to engage and to understand so that we can simply say, wow. Because all of the discoveries that we're awed about start with wow. Our understanding of what is beautiful in this world. Our understanding of what is beautiful in this world connects us to a mystery that we'll never fully understand. But here's how you know it. Because if you take that rose and you look at it closely and you continue to break it down into its smallest components, no matter how closely you look at it, it becomes more orderly and more consistent and more systematic. It clearly has been designed. If I take a photograph of that rose and we look at that photograph in raw format, there's all kinds of digital information that's in there, and it can be a huge file and you can change all kinds of things about it. But the closer you look at my photograph of that rose, what you find are flaws, imperfections. It's not right. It isn't real. It's a picture. Folks, when we search for what is beautiful, it leads us to what is true, and we know it's true because it is simple. And when we do that, when we engage in that, it allows us to step in to the mystery that God's given. I invite the praise team to get ready. There's not a lot of things that as a United Methodist pastor, we only have a few sacraments, and communion's one of them. And I always wondered why it was that I had to be trained on how to do communion, because it seems on the one hand, it seems kind of simple. But what I understand is this: in this meal, this experience, this activity, there is contained a powerful experience of God's grace that I can't understand and explain. I can tell you it's real. I can tell you that it's different. I can tell you that something happens when we share this. But even saying those things goes a little bit too far. This is a mystery that we get to be a part of. So let's all say it together again, that word, wow. Say, wow. And think about it this week. Look for the wows in your world.